So at Royal Roads University, before we begin any presentation or any meeting, we do like to acknowledge our traditional lands. So Royal Roads University, of course, does acknowledge that the campus is located on the traditional lands of the Wisepsum and Lekwungen ancestors and families. And it is with deep gratitude where we learn and work here, and where Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, staff, and faculty come together. So we're very grateful. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. So of course, while we're here, we have some learning and technology programs, our Masters of Arts in Learning and Technology and our Graduate Diploma in Learning and Technology through the School of Education and Technology at Royal Roads University. You can check out the course site and of course the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag RRUMallet. So be sure to check that out before we get started here. And of course, we're here for Designing Learning, looking towards 2023. We have a wonderful, wonderful panel for you today. We have so many folks joining us. We have Dr. Elizabeth Childs, of course, who is the professor and the program head, hello, of the Mallet program. And we have myself, Ariana Konjerski, who's an education specialist here at Royal Roads. And without further ado, we will meet our panel now. We have a lot of folks joining us today, a lot of brilliant minds from different industries and different sectors. We have Amber Donahue, Monique Brewer, Sharon Ambata-Villanueva, Mary Burgess, Cindy Harris, and Dr. Elizabeth Childs. So we'll just go around, do some introductions now. Amber, would you like to say a few words? Just introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Hi there. So I'm actually joining today from the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Nations, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai. And I also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina and Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. So I work in K-12 education, and I am a proud teacher and advocate of public education. I'm also a current Royal Roads Mallet student, and I'm very excited to be digging into the beginning stages of my applied research project. So that's me. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amber. Monique, would you like to say a couple words?
Hi, everyone. My name is Monique Brewer, and I'm joining from the traditional and unceded territories of the Wasanich and Lekwungen peoples at Camosun College in Victoria. And I'm situated at our beautiful interurban campus today, where the sun is shining through the window behind me. It's just lovely to feel that. I have been an instructional designer at Camosun for 4 years and have recently taken on a role to support applied learning with our faculty. And prior to that, I was also a K-12 teacher like Amber and have spent time in government doing instructional design work there as well. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Monique. We really appreciate you being here. Sharon, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. So it's an afternoon here in Toronto, and I'm actually a graduate of the Mallet program just last year, so it's still very recent. And I work at University Health Network, which is located in Toronto, Ontario. And I'm the senior manager there for digital education, where our main responsibility is to provide clinical application training for about 17,000 staff at University Health Network. So it's nice to be here.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We appreciate you joining us in the afternoon from Toronto. Mary, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, I will. My name's Mary Burgess. My pronouns are they and them. I am currently the Director of Learning Services at Camosun College. I've only been here for a few months. It's quite a ride so far. Prior to that, I was working at the system level as the Executive Director of BC Campus, which works with all of the public post-secondaries in BC in the areas of learning and teaching, educational technology. And before that, I was the Director of the Center for Teaching and Educational Technologies at Royal Roads University. So a lot of my work has been at the system level and sort of from the administrator lens, I would say. And I'm happy to be joining you today from the Lansdowne campus of Camosun College, which is the traditional unsurrendered territory of the Lekwungen speaking and the Wasanich people. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. And last but not least, we have Cindy. Cindy, would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is Cindy Harris. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm quite grateful to be living, loving, and learning here on the ancestral and unceded lands of the Lekwungen speaking people. I have a little bit of a cough today, so apologies. I do have a holes in my mouth. Getting over, the travel cold that I think is going around, right? So I'm fortunate that this is Zoom today because I might have had to cancel. Love technology, and I think we'll be talking a little bit more about that and how it connects us. So my background is, in the field of education. I have a Master of Arts from University of Ottawa, as well as I'm a Master's of Education. I'm an alumni from the Mallet program at Royal Rose University about, time flies, about 6 years ago now. I'm currently on the advisory council of the School of Education and Technology also, and I really enjoy that position and having conversations about what great work the university is doing and where it's going to support students today and tomorrow in the future. A large amount of my experience has been in the private sector, working with technical, occupational, and operator training. And as a result of that experience, I at one point joined the military, and I did over 14 years there as a training development officer before retiring and joining my current employer, which is Lockheed Martin Canada, where I am a technical training manager for domestic and international programs. And so I'm excited to have a conversation with our colleagues here today. We're all coming from different angles for the questions that we have at our forefront, and I'm excited to learn from you, and I'm also happy to share. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cindy. And of course, we have Dr. Elizabeth Childs here who will be emceeing our conversation for today. So of course, Elizabeth, would you like to say a few words?
Thanks, Ariana, and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for making time in your busy December to come and spend this sort of hour with us. I'm already so excited. It's like going out for lunch with a whole bunch of old good friends that you haven't had a chance to be with for a while. So that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Lekwungen First Nations people, ancestors, and families. And this morning, when my family gathered out on our little backyard plot of land to give our gratitude and thanks for the day and being able to live and work and play here, I was just reminded of how important it is to get that grounding and centering of who has come before. And as we look forward into where we might be going in the context of this webinar, I think all of the panelists that you have just been introduced to so eloquently have that real grounding in where they're situated in this space, those that have come before that have helped inform their practice, and then the willingness to share and share forward so that we can make these learning spaces even stronger than they are. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today. As Ariana had mentioned, part of my folio at Royal Roads is to help steward the Mallet and the diploma programs around learning and technology. And so we've been doing a couple of webinar series. We did some last fall and this year as well. So there'll be another one in January. But this one, I'm already can tell that we're going to have to do a part 2 because we were ambitious with the number of people and the conversation will be rich. So I'm going to dive us right into it. One of the things we talked about when the panel met last week, we were chatting around this notion of designing learning. And there was a lot of talk pre-pandemic, a lot of the discourse in many ways in online and distributed learning was around still a little bit of a sales pitch, right? Like it was always considered the second cousin. And now we're in this different space. And so as it is December, we thought it would be nice to reflect back on designing learning in these different sectors in 2022, and then looking forward to 2023, what might we see changing or needing to advocate for? So I think as a panel, we could just start maybe looking at what types of learning experiences are increasingly being expected by your participants, your students, your learners, and how have you been designing for those experiences in your sector this year? So maybe I would ask Amber, if you wouldn't mind sort of kickstarting us there on that one.
Yes, absolutely. So it's been an interesting transition or last couple of years in public education and working with young people and shifting online and coming back. And I would say that we've learned some lessons from the pandemic shift, emergency shift to online learning. And for me, one of them is recognizing that learning and technology, there's a relationship there, and looking at them as separate, I think, is doing a disservice to our students. And so taking a new approach to designing learning with this idea in mind that technology and learning go hand in hand, and school is not this separate entity anymore, because we're always online, we're always learning, and our students are always online. And in fact, our kids are probably are online more than some of the adults are. And we need to really be mindful of that when we're designing learning experiences in school, because I don't want the outside of school and the in school to become these separate things. They need to stay interrelated, and we need to be thinking of that when we're designing experiences. So change is happening slowly, as it does in public education, but certainly it's that marriage, that relationship between learning and technology that to me is so important when we're designing, when we're thinking about learning, and when we're engaging our students to be 21st century citizens and learners.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering, Monique or Mary, when you think of the faculty you work with, or perhaps the student population that you would see in your setting, are you seeing a similar meshing and coming together of the need for school and space outside of school to be more integrated?
Monique, do you want to go ahead? You work with faculty more closely than I do on that one.
Sure. I think so. I think that marriage is inevitable. It's happening. I see a lot of complexity in our students' lives, whether it's in school or at home, and that need for critical skill development is there. I think what I've seen in the last couple of years in terms of expectation of students is more of that active engagement in their learning. It's always been, a continuum from that sort of sage on the stage to that active participant model. But I think one of the gifts maybe that COVID brought us was when faculty went online, in March of 2020, and that how am I going to finish my course? It opened up conversation to refocus on learning outcomes. What is it you're trying to achieve in this course? And let's look at that content and those activities that were not serving those learning outcomes, and let's thin that out. And since we've been back and designing maybe more blended learning experiences, I'm seeing a lot more conversation design around the flipped classroom. People know what that word means and that phrase, and they're comfortable with it, and pushing some of that more passive content, to the pre-class. And a lot of the traditional exams are being done online, and really trying to use that precious space, that time and space that we have together to do more of that skill building, whether it's in our teams, analyzing case studies together, doing practice skill work. So I think that, it's a slow dial, but I think that dial is moving with our faculty. And I think it has to do a little bit with that push-pull of our worlds aren't separate, right? That world outside of class to in school. And they need to carry these skills from class back into that world, whether it's the world of work or being an active participant in their lives and our society.
Yeah, and I would agree with that too. And I want to pick up on what Amber was saying about that lack of separation, because I think one of the things that I've been seeing is faculty going where students are. So setting up a Discord server instead of thinking that students are all going to come and use the chat in D2L, those kinds of things where we are addressing where they are having technology in their lives and going there to connect with them and build relationships instead of having this separateness. So I really love that concept, Amber. Thanks for bringing that up.
I think that's a really key point, Mary, that it's such a shift, right, from the traditional roles or the role profile, if you will, of what faculty and or public ed would do, right? This is what the system has bought, and we use this, as opposed to, okay, where are you actually having these conversations and how can we get in there so we can continue to learn together? Cindy, are you seeing that in your setting? Because I think you've been struggling this for many years, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should start by describing, my two customer bases, if you will. So inside of Lockheed, the discipline that I support, sustainment, it supports the training and education for all of our Lockheed Martin Canada employees, as well as the other end of it, which is largely our international and domestic military customer. So when we think about learning, we have two primary customers, right? Largely, in internal to Lockheed, we have our 21st century professional engineer, right? And then outside of our employee base, our customer is the 21st century warfighter, right? That's what it is. And so the interesting piece is that what we have seen in the last couple of years as a result of the pandemic is that there's kind of a common need through these very two different groups of individuals. And it's that they have a shared expectation of just-in-time training. And there's no more opportunity that I'm seeing for the middle game. Right? Everyone has so many demands on their lives. It's I need it now. I need to be able to be 100% proficient tomorrow. So you have to give it to me straight and allow me to apply it physically and have that assessment of my skills done in a practical environment, so I can literally leave that learning environment, be it in person, hybrid, fully remote, whatever it may be, and carry on into my job tomorrow and be 110% successful. So that opportunity that we were supporting pre-COVID, where, you get someone to that 70, 80%, and then there's some on-the-job piece where there's refinement and what have you, and further growth through coaching and mentoring, that middle game for us is now gone. Right. And so really, we almost have to over design, over assess, because we have to make sure that people are, if they are coming to the learning environment, whatever it may be, if the time is set aside for the training and education, then it has to be 100% worthwhile for them so that they can be successful the minute they walk out of that learning environment. Whether that is literally flipping from one, supported platform to another call, right? Take it, use it. And that's kind of where we are, right? The middle game, in my view, is a little bit gone.
Yeah. No pressure. Right? No pressure.
No pressure. None whatsoever. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Sharon, I think you would probably resonate with some of what Cindy is sharing. And I know, like, one of the things, Amber, that you sort of hinted at that I'm wondering, Sharon, if you want to speak to a bit, is around digital fluency and digital skills and the ability to meet students where they're at, or to be 100% ready to go. So Sharon, what's your perspective?
Exactly. And just listening to my colleagues here, and everything they've said is definitely resonating. So my situation is I work for University Health Network, which is supporting healthcare professionals. So actually my consulting project when I graduated from my lab program is how to continuously support the development of digital skills for healthcare professionals, because as we continue to digitize the healthcare environment. So totally agree that, with the shift in virtual training, we can really appreciate, and then there's this heightened appreciation of education and technology integrating and supporting learning. And at the same time there's also the challenge and the heightened awareness that we're pushing virtual training. So for example, in healthcare, although some of us here are so used to online learning, online training, not so much in healthcare because we are used to that face-to-face interactions. Our culture is we want to be there with our patient. So the shift for us to virtual training because of the pandemic was a bit challenging. And then there comes that digital literacy where we know, but because of the data that we've collected, it really solidified the issue of the divide between who's digital literate. I would even say somewhat competent and not so competent. I'm not even quite confident that we're really in that highly fully competent organization yet. So we have initiatives to ensure that we can get there, but as I think it was Mary that mentioned that it's a slow dial, we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. I think this is going to be a slow and ongoing process where there needs to be a lot of commitment from leadership. I also want to, something that Cindy resonated with me is that middle point where we used to have that, okay, you know, we have more support for our learners or students once they finish their formal training. And that is another issue that we're finding, especially in healthcare, where resources are always a challenge. We need to be always fiscal responsible in how we are using the money. So use the money wisely. So there's always that push and pull again of how are we going to support our healthcare professionals because of patient safety to make sure that they have what they need once they've done training. So I think there's the learner expectations, but I think one thing that we also need to be reminded is what about the expectation from our instructional designers, from our trainers, from our educators? There is also that the expectation, especially from my experience, is the ability to be more technical because we're shifting more and more to virtual. That there is an expectation that they'll be able to be technical, troubleshoot things when things go wrong, when they're training. So I think there's also that heightened awareness that it's not only the learners that need to be digital literate, but also we also need to make sure that we are supporting our educators and trainers.
I think that's an excellent point. I'm seeing lots of head nods. So let's unpack that one a little bit more. So, you know, it's lovely to say, hey, we offer all these lovely learning designs and they run the gamut of face-to-face, hybrid, fully online. And we need to build skills for the learners. We need to build skills for the trainers. But so what does that look like? Amber, what does that look like in K-12? Where do you feel in your viewpoint that K-12 educators are at with their comfort level to negotiate the space that you were talking about earlier, where it is more of that intersection?
That's a really good question. And it's one that's hard to answer because the range of where people are in terms of comfort level is huge. But what I will say, and you know, we're always going back to the pandemic, the shift to online. And there was a lot that was challenging about that. But one of the good things was that it pushed a lot of teachers out of their comfort zone into this brand new space and this brand new environment. And how do you be a good teacher and do a good job in that new space, in that new environment, when maybe the pedagogical knowledge that you have isn't necessarily targeted towards this new environment? And so we're learning, right? And I think that the fact that we had to engage in a digital space was really good for a lot of teachers, for all teachers, and opened really our eyes to, okay, what are the possibilities and where are the gaps and what we need to learn in order to be effective educators in digital spaces, because it's not the same as face-to-face, right? And I think about, you know, it was hard. It was a hard time for kids. It was a hard time for teachers, but it was maybe the the necessary, I don't know, necessary evil to get us thinking, okay, what does the future look like? What needs to change as a result of this crazy situation that we went through on the planet? So, you know, we're thinking about it. And to me, that's a really important first step.
I think I really appreciate that your comments, Amber, because I think, I mean, most of you know this is a little bit of a passion project for me, right? So how can you expect someone to teach and be in a different way if they don't know what that different way looks like and they haven't experienced it? And then the thing that is always so striking as that moment of, interesting, you know, in British Columbia, for example, with teacher qualification service, as of yet, there is no accord for online learning, which means there's no requirement for any post-secondary in BC in their teacher ed programs to teach teachers how to be in these spaces and how to design in these spaces and how to teach online. So when you're, you know, a faculty of education and you have all of this broad knowledge and rich history of this field that you have to work to impart on your baby teachers, and you don't have to do this one thing because it's not in the books or it's not a checklist. Each program takes it up a bit differently, right? And I think there is that, Sharon, to your point, there's that leadership piece. There's that, I mean, in this case, a policy directive, right, that needs to come along in parallel with this shifting attitude. I'm wondering, Mary and Monique, in the higher ed space, are you seeing shifts in that policy, if you think of the sort of the policy directive or anything that would go beyond just faculty saying, okay, yeah, I got to go meet them where they are? Because I think there also are some who might be saying, oh, can we just go back to how it was?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, one of the interesting pieces is that in BC and Ontario, there have been these province-wide digital learning initiatives happening from the ministries. And that obviously is a huge indicator of what they value, and they fund our system. And so we need to be looking at those elements in particular. But I think one of the things I was thinking about, Amber, as you were talking, and just the questions that that Ariana had sent out to us, I was thinking about this desire to kind of stop the change process that people have. Like, we got through the pandemic. What is the new normal, and what are we supposed to do now? Well, what we're supposed to do now actually is have a growth mindset and develop foundational relationships with each other and with ourselves so that we can be resilient in the face of change, because change is not going away. Technologies are going to continue to evolve. We're going to have to, each year there will be a new version of D2L or whatever. We're moving away from Blackboard Collaborate here at the college and moving further towards Zoom and Teams. Those are ongoing challenges for a change management process that really require us to have foundational relationships with each other so that we're resilient. Otherwise, the new normal is change. The new normal is understand this is not a stopping thing. We're not going to settle on this is the technology you need to know now for the rest of your career. That's not going to happen. So I think it's more about our own way of facing change together and enabling that, as opposed to we're going to teach this specific technology. And I would love it if that was kind of the foundational piece in teacher ed programs as well, is that what truly is an Indigenous perspective of the foundation of the relationships and the communities being the most important part, and then we can build things on top of that.
I just want to pick up on something that Mary was talking about, the growth mindset, right? You know, this is a really interesting space for us because of a lot of the contract work that we do domestically and internationally. It's not, you know, in 3 months or in year, right? These are, like, you think about CSE, Canada's shipbuilding program, right? For the new surface combatant. This is a 10, 15, this is a 45-year in-service sustainment contract, right? So the requirements that a customer sets up front, you know, don't have a whole lot of room for shifting as things in our world are changing, right? And so in our world, there are these things called engineering change requests that can come in and re-attack a design of a solution, right? And so I think one of the areas that our company has really been dynamic in over the course of the pandemic is building enough flexibility into our delivery of requirements to allow for change without having to go back to, in the case of Canada or any other military, the Treasury Board or the governmental offices and advocates for re-signature of that solution, because we recognize the way it was is never going to be again. And so we have to always allow for change in our solution, right? And that's a really interesting conversation point with our customer to bring their minds around, because depending on, where in the world that customer is, they have a preference for in-person learning or not. They have their traditional favorites, right? And so it's us, in a position to strike the balance with them to say, we have to be prepared for tomorrow. And if you look at Lockheed's, current motto, it's like, we want to be ahead of ready, and that we believe that to our core in the delivery of excellence for our customers in how we engineer a solution, how we design a solution on the training front, the product side, the service side, because our regular coaching with our customer is we have to build flexibility. Our solutions need to be tech agnostic so that anything can be inserted and integrated, right? And move them away from that traditional compartmental design, right? And that is, the space that I find myself and my colleagues really working in to make sure that, the experience they went through doesn't push them backwards, because at the end of the day, no one will be successful, right?
Your reference about customer really reflects for me on our students. And I think in post-secondary, the driver for change may not be our leadership. It's going to be our students, and they're going to walk with their feet, and they want the flexibility. And we're hearing that over and over again. There's no one size fits all model in post-secondary, and our students want the options that will support them. And I have a lot of faculty come to me and they want to do something in their course because students have asked for it.
Right.
My other courses use the assignment drop boxes. Can we not use them here? We want to be able to meet online in our teams. Can we do that? So there's a lot of pressure coming up from below, I think, in a way that's a healthy driver of change. And I think the dialogue will be, how can we make that change pedagogically sound? As Amber was mentioning, one of the challenges in post-sec is many of our faculty don't come with any educational background. So it's not just orienting their pedagogy to a new space, it's to a blended space. So that has some levels of complexity that we have to look at as we create some sustainability models going forward.
I also want to add in terms, and this is really, good point about change and sustainability. And one of the things that we're trying to also work towards sustainability and change is really developing that partnership. Mary, you mentioned about, the foundational relationship with each other and also with ourselves to build that resiliency. And that's what we're trying to achieve, partnering up with different healthcare organizations within Greater Toronto area and even outside Greater Toronto area of how can we share our resources and our lessons learned from not only from the pandemic, but how we are shifting even with our learning design, where we want to engage more and more our healthcare professionals, not just our leaders, but the subject matter experts in developing training for them, what is working for them. So when they leave that virtual training or learning space, when they go out and apply that in the real world, there is that fluid movement from learning to application. So more and more, we're trying to look at different strategies of what we call self-serve. So how can you design, and from what you've taken from our department, digital education, and use it, iterate it, that will work specific to your own unit. So whether it's surgical, whether it's emergency department, because all those have different nuances when it comes to their needs and workflow.
There we go. I was just thinking as you were speaking, Sharon, about that lovely intersection, like tapping into this needs, being able to work and then share it more broadly, that people can then take it up. So there's, you know, there's a plug for open resources there. But also it struck me of an example in the height, maybe 2021, I think UBCO was doing a really interesting pairing, basically, with, they took students who applied and partnered them with instructional designers in their Center for Teaching, whatever it's called, because I've lost the name right now. And basically they gave them this experience of how to work with faculty to design courses. And they ended up being able to scale in a way that allowed them to reach many more faculty. The feedback from faculty by and large was phenomenal, because they got to work with students who understood what their colleagues and their counterparts needed as they were going through the courses. And so the course design at the end really what was getting so much closer to student-centered, because they had that sort of immersive mentorship partnership pairing. And I thought it was a really great example of one of those, okay, we just had to make this happen because we had too many courses to put online, we had not enough people, what can we do, right? And so this was one of those little creative fires that started and flourished. And I'm wondering, when you think of 2023 and we think of trying to do something that's scalable or sustainable in this space, what does it look like for you in your spaces? What are you trying to play with at the edges now? Or maybe you've already made it mainstream and you're looking forward to rolling it out in 2023. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. I'll let you jump in when you're ready.
Maybe I'll jump in. I just have to step out in a few minutes.
Sure, thanks, Monique.
Yeah, sustainability is definitely on my mind, and I think on our teaching and learning folks at our center here. I was reading the Canadian Digital Learning Research Association spring survey results with the focus on BC, and the top theme, what teaching and learning challenges are most pressing, and 88% had identified faculty fatigue and burnout, you know, as the #1 issue. So we look at our landscape and it's very complex, and we want our faculty to, you know, have developed flexible learning experiences, integrated indigenization, UDL, work online, blended. We're adding all these layers of complexity to people who are burnt out. So how can we as a teaching and learning center think differently about what we're doing and finding ways to synthesize or bring that together and help people teach smarter rather than harder? And I think for us, we're looking at how do we re-envision the work that we're doing and how we're doing it. So one example is we have instructional designers who work with people online, and we have educational developers working with faculty to support their face-to-face, but most of our faculty are in some type of hybrid teaching model. So how does this disparate support model serve them? So we need to take some step back in what we're doing to help breathe some life into our faculty who are really struggling. And where is sustainability if they're in burnout? So it's a difficult place, I think.
Yeah, I really appreciate that comment, Monique, because I think, I mean, that is one of the most pressing issues as we head into, well, now and as we head into 2023, is just people's individual capacity, their professional capacity to do this work and continue to do all of the asks that you've identified, right? It's quite a large list now. And then it translates also to the end user, to the student, who's having to then also, wait a minute, now I'm having to do this stuff before I come to class, and I didn't before I just showed up. And so there's it's creating a different experience for many that for some that I've been listening to, certainly on our end, it's a bit of a jolt. It's like, no, wait a minute, that's not what I thought I was getting into. I like that, what can you do as a unit to help them teach smarter and not harder, right? How can we sustain this? And Amber, I'm wondering, I would imagine in the K-12 space, you're also wrestling with this. We're just about to dive in. We did some work last year around design principles for K-12 online learning, and we're surveying BC again on that. And so we're hearing much of this, right? Like this, we're tired and this is a lot. And it's not what I was trained for. And I appreciate that I still need to do professional development, but boy, I have to do that on Indigenous, and I have to do it on all of these other things, and on climate, and on health. How would you say, looking forward to 2023, and you think of issues of sustainability, where do you see that play out in K-12?
Well, I think I just noticed that Cindy popped something in the chat, and I'm looking at her comment: sustainment is support plus time plus goals equals reward, and I agree with that. And the thing that in my mind is going to make a big difference for anybody in K-12 moving forward is that time to dig in and breathe and learn and recognize and acknowledge and set those goals. And, sometimes that time isn't available, but that to me will be the most important thing to get people back to a place where they can engage in this process of change, because whether we like it or not, like we've talked about, if things are changing, there is no normal, and a new normal, I don't know, the new normal is change. And I think it was Mary, I wanted to go back to what you said about this connection and this togetherness. And I think people supporting each other and realizing that we are all in this, whether you're, on the education side, whether you're a student, whether it's K-12, higher ed, private, everybody has faced challenges in the last couple of years. And so seeking and providing that support and having the time to do that, I think, is what is going to make for sustainability moving forward and giving people their fire back, I guess, after what they've experienced in the last few years.
Absolutely. Well said. Monique, I know you have to go. So before you scoot, I just wanted to say a big thank you for joining and invite you to listen to the rest of the recording to hear the rest of the conversation.
Great. Thank
But
you.
If there are any final words you wanted to share, please go ahead.
I think it's also a very exciting time to be in this industry when there is change. And although it's hard, I think that's where the creativity will emerge. So I'm excited by what is to come. And I look forward to listening to the rest of this presentation. Thank you so much.
Super. Thanks, Monique. Sharon, I was thinking of you as Amber was reading out what she put in the chat, and how that would play in your area, right? I mean, you have such a diverse workforce that you're supporting, right? You're all the way into the paraprofessionals, the paramedicine, the medicine, the people that work in the hospitals to just make beds be where they need to be and everything ready to go in the OR. So how is this notion of sustainability in learning design? How do you take that up in your work?
Yes, and yes, I was just also reading Cindy's statement here about support and time, and these are the two for digital education. So I've been sharing this, trying to advocate for this in different leadership meetings. Is the idea of what can we do to ensure that we can sustain supporting our healthcare professionals, and it's from our housekeepers, from our porters, to all the way to our executive VPs. And there are two things that we're working towards that we're trying to advocate, getting our leadership to champion this is two things. First is we need to develop partnership with interprofessionals within our organization. So that's from the engineers, the change managers, project managers, from unit clinical managers to our team, and work together of what does learning and technology look like, that it's not just a digital education problem, it's an organization-wide problem. So what can we do to work together towards that? So more and more, I would say, meetings and action items are being brought forward to what that look like. So we're still in that, that exploration phase. And then the second piece is the idea of creating a self-serve support for our user community. So what that would look like when we say self-serve is that coming from grassroots, where it's us, those users that are using the system that wants to learn more. Can we find those people that would like to champion and partner with us, which is already happening, where they come to us, hey, you know what, this is, I think, how it will work for our ICU nurses versus our surgical administrative folks. So it's trying to work with those experts with our support. So they're designing their own training, but of course with the support from the education experts and the learning designers. So I think that's one way for us to sustain this, because in terms of resources, there's not enough of our educators to support 17,000 staff and counting. So we need to really diversify and keep developing partnership to sustain learning designs and really supporting users.
One of the things that I'm hearing, and so I'm going to just toss it out there and see if I'm hearing it correctly, is bluntly, a sense of responsibility, a co-responsibility to create learning, recognizing that each individual brings expertise to the table. Some of it might be learning design, instructional design, web design, on-floor nurse design, right? Reality, lived experience. But what I'm hearing you say is it's no longer go to the training department, they'll get you all ready. It's, all right, so here's what we can bring to the equation. What would you like to learn? How can we help you get the most out of that experience? But the learner needs to do something. They need to engage. They need to be responsible. They need to advocate and be involved in the co-creation of their learning. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, exactly. And that's one of our strategies, to build this accountability and ownership, this sense of ownership that, hey, we own this. So we care about this. This is what we value. And there's more of that motivation and engagement and drive to keep bringing it forward.
It's so interesting, Sharon, that you're talking about it in that way, because I was thinking about, in education, post-secondary and K-12, we kind of can get philosophical about what is the purpose of the academy, right? It's dialogue, it's learning. But Cindy and Sharon, you are both in a different situation where there's a crucial need for your learners to get the learning. Mm-hmm. But it's really interesting that you say that, Sharon, because one of the things that I was thinking about is, as the learner, I need to be vulnerable and say, I don't know. Right. I don't know what I need to know in order to succeed, I believe. And so who can help me with that? And that's not the model of the sage on the stage. That is not where we've positioned educators to date. We've expected them to show up, know what they're doing, and get criticized if they don't appear to know what they're doing, right? So I think there's something there. And for me, there's a million things that link back to inclusion, but this is the seeing people as whole people, no matter which of the jobs that they're in, and allowing them to come and express their fears. I don't know what I think everybody else knows. I think I'm going to look stupid in front of my students, and build community on that shared experience that then allows us to say, there's a thing I need help with. Who can help me, instead of, my God, I have to know all of this before I show up for this online thing that I'm doing in 2 hours. There's a cultural shift there about showing up with vulnerability to get the help that you actually need instead of the help somebody else has decided you need based on an outdated colonial model of education.
Well
Yeah,
said, Mary. And
I want
Cindy,
to
go
hop
ahead.
in. I'm just on that note there, you know, the internal customer base, like the Lockheed Martin employee, right, today, you know, it's about creating that culture of psychological safety that I just put there, where it's okay to say, I don't know, right? Everyone's a professional. Everyone is very talented, and together we are successful. But every day presents a new challenge, and we may not know all the answers, but we have to figure that out together. And so certainly, you know, from a design perspective, you know, we flipped kind of, instead of like flipped classroom, like we flipped resourcing away from the design and development and put it on the front end for the analysis of the need. Like, where is the gap? Right? Let me be there to tell you it's okay that you don't know. And I'm going to tell you I don't know, but I can ask some questions to try and figure out where that gap is. And then together, once we all understand where the gap could be, you know, we look at a model that everyone, you know, could support to close that gap. Right. And so we are using our internal ISD type talent in a different way to support our Lockheed talent pool and their professional development requirements. Right. It's very different with our customer outside of the company, because truly we have to design the training because we are delivering an integrated engineered solution that they don't know. Right? We know it, we built it, so we have to do it for them. So and we use, you know, our relationship with the customer and to better understand their preference for learning, like the different type of learning styles and what's kind of the caps and the limbs, right, of where a solution must fall. But at the end of the day, we have to drive the solution because it's our product that we're delivering, right? And at the end of the day, we are in the business of building technology that needs to work at a critical moment in time, right? So there's no shared solution space there, right? Yep.
That's really, really insightful. And Amber, I'm sure with your K-12 hat on, you were so excited to hear this because in my experience, especially at the elementary level, that's what you're trying to do with learners and with kids, is to help them get this growth mindset, to understand you don't have to be perfect, make a million mistakes, because that's how we learn. And you know, so we collectively, the big we, you know, enough of us in the research and in history and going back over 100 years, if you want to bring in Dewey, we know this, right? And yet here we are still wrestling with this, Mary, to your point, with learners being able to be vulnerable and say, I don't know, I need help. And so asking for help is hard, right? It opens you up in a society and culture that perhaps that isn't necessarily where we've used to been comfortable. So Amber, I'll let you jump in on this notion of growth mindset a minute and where you maybe see going forward, and then I'm mindful of our time. So,
yeah, I mean, I absolutely, like, that vulnerability piece is huge, and being able to say, I don't know, you know, where do I go for help? That's huge as well. And, you know, we're in an interesting time when I look at some of the interactions that people have in online spaces and social media, where that vulnerability isn't necessarily a good thing. So we are in a very, you know, I don't know how to balance those two worlds, because that vulnerability is huge. Being able to admit when you need to learn, but you're not sure what to do, is huge. But then at the same time, there's this other part of our culture that's like, oh, no, like you show up, you're the best. That's it. It's the optics, right? So, you know, I have hope that we will head down a road where people understand that importance, but yes, and leadership in that area, huge. But yeah, it's an interesting, I don't know where I sit in those, you know, in the middle of those two worlds, but yeah.
Well, and I think that's the beginning of the conversation, right? Is to say that, like, we've got to talk about this. This is an important conversation, and I would echo your comment, Mary, that leadership, and I would not the big L leadership, what we're doing here, people that are involved in the doing of the work, with whatever group that you're working with, is trying to have these conversations, to model the conversations that are available and open to have. Everyone who's listening and part of this conversation, I am so thrilled that you're here, because now you can, of course, get the sense that now we could just go on and on forever. But I'm also mindful that you might like to ask a few questions of what the conversation, where we've traveled in this past hour. So please don't hesitate, pop them in the chat, and we'll all be able to, jump in on them if you have any questions. While you're doing that, I'm gonna ask the panel something we didn't really prompt. If you had one word, and yes, really one, even I will try my very best to stick to one, about how you're feeling about learning and designing learning for 2023. What's a word that sort of captures that for you? And we'll wait while people also in the audience have a chance to give some questions.
I think I can start, because I think the place for me to start is I'm afraid. I am afraid. I don't know what I'm doing. I want inclusion. That's the word I want it to be, but I am afraid.
Yep. Awesome, Mary. Thank you. Amber, you put hopeful in there.
I did. The fact that these conversations are happening to me is so important. It's the spark for the fire, right? And it has to start somewhere. So I guess that's why I'm hopeful. They're happening, and that's important.
Yeah, I want to echo on both Mary and Amber's words, because I have like stressed and hopeful. And the stress is more of a fear, but I'm not really afraid. Like I'm a very optimistic person. So even just putting this out there, it's like, well, for all of the solutions and ideas and that great opportunity that lays ahead to really come to fruition, we need a lot of things, right? Going back to the sustainment piece. And if we don't get one of those things, or even partial support of all of those things, will we get to where we need to be? I'm not sure, right? And that's the thing that keeps me up at night. Like, how do I make sure that I get all three of those things, right? Cindy's bucket needs to be full, right? And when it's not, it's like, okay, I can redesign, or we can renegotiate, or what have you. But thinking about the two customers, but it's just really hopeful, really excited, lots of energy around where we are today coming out of the pandemic, and how our customers internally, externally now feel about using technology and understanding why learning is so important. But it's like, if we don't have the support, if we don't have the time, then like, where are we going to be? All of this excitement for nothing, right? And so that's the thing that kind of stresses me out, right? So.
Deidre, thank you so much for joining us, and for your lovely comment and the advocacy for part 2 of this conversation. I love that. Sharon, what would be your word?
One word, Elizabeth. That's
I know.
I would say I know it's not one word, but I'm cautiously excited. I'm cautious and excited at the same time of what the future holds, especially with our strategy of developing more of this partnership, where it's not us owning the problem, it's us and everybody in the organization trying to partner and solve this problem and the opportunities that will come with that.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, my word, I know you're all amazed. I have just one word. Hard to believe. It's inspired. I am really inspired. I think that this conversation has just really validated for me some of those common themes of relationality and community and that sense of togetherness, that none of us is as good as all of us working together on something. And so while there is, of course, that fear of the unknown, the fear of change, the exhaustion of doing this work, I think that you are all very inspiring. And the fact that people have set aside an hour in their day in December to come and have these conversations, I think just speaks to that. So yeah, I had one word, but I can go on and on about it for hours, you know. I am conscious of the time. I know folks who have been listening in and folks who might listen to the recording may have blocked just the hour. So I will wrap us here and say a big heartfelt thank you for this conversation. It has been more than I could ever have imagined. So thank you. I'm excited about a part 2. So we'll see on that. And just for all of you who did join us, thank you so much for making time. We hope it was valuable for you. And as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out and we can, you know, somehow connect that. Ariana, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think you might have a little close that you do.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I'll just share my screen again really quick here. Everybody can see this, I believe. Yes. Perfect. So we just do have a couple of upcoming intakes. If you enjoyed the conversation, which I hope you did, I know I did, we do have the Masters of Arts and Graduate Diploma in Learning and Technology online and blended, and that starts in March 27th, 2023. That application deadline is coming up soon, December 27th, 2022. It's hard to believe it is a few weeks away. So if you've been thinking about applying to either of these programs, it's a great time to do so. And we also do have, of course, some services available to you. We have financial aid and awards for loans, bursaries, scholarships, student research scholarships, funding, and emergency funding. So you can always reach royalroads.ca/admission/financial aid awards. Our enrollment services, they're wonderful. They can be reached at learn.more@royalroads.ca if you want to learn a little bit more about these programs. We also have some phone numbers on the screen, and they're really helpful folks. They can help you narrow down your program options, help you with your application, and connect you with students and alumni like these wonderful folks that were here today. So thank you again so much, everybody. Such wonderful conversation and just some really rich ideas. So we thank you all for being here. Again, learn.more@royalroads.ca and check out the SET blog at set.royalroads.ca/blog for any further information and some further questions. So thank you all. I will leave it there, but we wish you a wonderful day and connect with us. And we hope to hear from you soon. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.